Venezuela. We got to go overseas for a minute. We got to keep y'all informed on what's happening overseas. Venezuelan is having a clash over an election. An election. They saying that an election might have been stolen over there.
Turning now to Venezuela, where violent protests have erupted over allegations that Sunday's presidential election was stolen by the country's authoritarian leader, Nicolas Maduro. The opposition candidate, who was strongly favored in the polls, says he has proof that he won. Lilia Luciano is the only U.S. network correspondent in Venezuela.
It was widespread chaos on the streets of Venezuela Monday, as thousands of demonstrators across the country protested what they say was an attempt by President Nicolas Maduro to steal the country's presidential election. We were there as a brawl erupted in the capital, in Caracas.
A group of protesters in the front of the line throwing the canisters of tear gas back at police. There's a lot of police motorcycles here confronting them. You're seeing a lot of tear gas. The group of protesters back there, some of them told us that they assembled peacefully, and that's when police started arriving and all of this confrontation started taking place.
Soy Nicolás Maduro Moro, presidente.
Maduro claimed victory for a third six-year term, while challenger Edmundo González claimed to have the proof that he received 70% of the vote against Maduro's 30. President Maduro took office in 2013, and during his presidency, more than 7 million citizens have fled the country over poverty and violence.
I wonder where they went. I wonder where they went. Now, we have an estimated 10 to 15 million. Some put the estimation as high as 20. As high as 20. We have an estimated 10 to 15 million just over the span of the last 4 years, the last 3.5 years. They're saying that we have an estimated 10 to 15 million illegal immigrants flooding into this country to seek better opportunity or to commit crimes against people that are unsuspecting and didn't know that they were in their communities. They're getting food, they're getting housing, they're getting shelter, they're getting healthcare coverage, they're making sure that they're getting taken care of all across the board. I wonder where all of these people is going. Now, you got to remember that 7.7 million fled because I am paying attention to the fact that what's going over in Venezuela and stolen elections and all of that. But my biggest thing is two things. Number one, I want to know where it comes back to the money. And then number two, I want to know how it affects us as Americans. I want to know how this is directly tied to and correlating to us as Americans. They saying that an estimated 7.7 million fled since 2014. 2014. Now, one thing that I've always given Obama credit for is that they've always labeled him the deporter in chief. You know that. Those of you that are familiar with the Millionaire Morning Show, you know that. What Trump leapfrogged off of as far as the immigration policies and kept in place, the same way that Biden kept in place those tariffs that Trump instilled in our society, one of the things that Trump then leapfrogged off of, and then for some reason he experienced opposition. He experienced opposition and said, we don't want no more border walls. We don't want to protect our borders. We don't want to give no money to Homeland Security. We're going to make this a bipartisan deal that we have to negotiate. And what they did was they put in funding for Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan into this bipartisan deal and this agreement in which they don't want to have this conversation. See, this is why they fear me. I'm going to reiterate some stances that I said in the last segment. This is why they fear me. Because they don't want me to talk about the fact when you ask them, hey, should we hold you responsible for opening up our borders and why did you do it? What was the real reason? After they get done fumbling through that answer, and if you ask any Democrat this answer, this question, they don't even want to have a conversation, let alone designating Kamala Harris as the borders are, right? But then they'll lean into and they'll say, well, listen, it's the Republicans that held it up in the legislature. Why did you sue Texas for protecting its borders? Neither here nor there. We're not even going to go into that. Let's have a deeper conversation. All right, cool. We got a whole bunch of Venezuelans that's running into this country. They saying that that's one of the biggest demographic and population that is coming into the United States of America over the last 3.5 years alone, right? And so when you ask them the question, okay, listen, why did this have to be a bipartisan deal? I thought it was the federal government's job to protect our borders, not even just the individual states. Oh, so if I read that deal, they directly tied it to funding Ukraine, Taiwan, and Israel. So they were going to say, well, it was the Republicans' fault, but the Republicans wanted that to be a completely separate measure and issue as far as what money was going over there to Zelensky to fight a proxy war. And for us to be a part of NATO, which we're overwhelmingly giving the majority of the funding for. It's not that the Republicans didn't want their borders protected. That's the landmark thing that they stood on. It was that they didn't want them to try to hold you over a barrel and say that we're going to give some money to Ukraine in the same package, in the same deal. But the only way that we're going to give you money in order to protect the borders is if we add this into it. And so while you seeing all of this stuff that's happening in Venezuela and 7.7 million people is flooded into this country, y'all were being distracted by Meg Thee Stallion because you don't actually read anything that's going on inside of your Congress, your Senate, your legislative branches that they're so eager to sign. They give you games while they pass legislation that's not in your favor that keeps them in power.
Many to the U.S.-Mexico border. Blanca Suarez was among those who fled with her young boys, but returned home to vote and hope for a regime change.
¿Qué venezolano va a salir a enfrentarse en una selva?
She says no Venezuelan would want to brave the jungle, risking violence, rape, and death, but says now it's a necessity for her.
And this morning, the opposition has called for peaceful but massive protests, as they say, for people to defend the truth and allow for a transition to happen. There is grave concern about what they could be met with.
I want to go over into the White House because I have not reviewed this next video at all. I didn't even see the full of this video. But the White House is actually reacting to, and I guess they were taking questions as far as what was happening over in Venezuela. So I wanted to stop over here really quickly before we go into the final segment of the show. Allow me to play this for you guys.
Arlene, what time did you get home last night?
1:45.
1:45. Okay. All right. Let's do this.
It's been a rough morning.
And Matt, too? I see Matt back there.
Can too. So can you give us an update on where the U.S. stands on the Venezuela elections? In particular, I know the president is speaking with President Lula of Brazil later, but just wondering if there's any progress on how the U.S. is trying to decide, what to do.
So a couple of things. I believed right before I walked out, a statement from the National Security Council spokes went out, so certainly refer you to that. But just to give you a little bit of what was in that statement, obviously the U.S. has been closely monitoring Venezuela's presidential election that took place on Sunday and the subsequent announcements by Venezuela's National Electoral Council. First, let me say that the U.S. applauds the Venezuelan people for their courage and commitment to democracy by participating in this election in the face of repression and adversity. So we continue to call on Venezuela's electoral authorities to release full, transparent, and detailed voting results, including by polling stations as well. This is especially critical given that there are clear signs that the election results announced by the Venezuela's National Electoral Council do not reflect the will of the Venezuelan people as it was expressed at the ballot box on July 28th. We are also reviewing other electoral data shared by civil society organizations and the reports of international election monitors. The United States stands on the side of the democratic aspirations of the Venezuelan people, including supporting their right to express their views freely and with.
So basically what she's saying is that the United States of America hasn't taken a position as far as who's the clear winner of the election. The United States, I'm going to break it down from a C student's perspective. They're doing a lot of reading, they're doing a lot of bloviating, right? And what she's basically saying is that the United States of America supports a free or a democratic election to which the people pick their leader. Basically saying we want fair and we want the people to be able to support themselves. They're not taking a position. They're not saying who's the winner is or anything like that. That's largely what she's saying. The United States of America supports the idea of a fair election and that the people should be able to get the right leader based off of who they voted for. Could have saved that answer and said that, listen, we want them to have the right election and we want the right leader to be in office. You don't have to do all of this extra word salad. Just give it to me straight. Give it to me like a child.
Without reprisal. So that is where we stand. And again, we're just going to not get ahead of that. But we've been very clear about the election results.
Unclear.
Can you help us understand a little bit about what the president was talking about last night? He was asked when he'd go campaign for Vice President Harris, and he said, well, I did today. I was wondering if there was yesterday, was there a campaign element to yesterday? Was he sort of talking broadly? I just wondered if you could help us.
So, as you know, the president gave a little. Is this when we came back at 1:15 a.m. and 1:15 a.m. on the South Lawn? The president took a couple of your colleagues' questions. I think he was.
I thought Biden be in the bed by 8:30. Ain't that what he said? He said he's gonna start going to bed by 8:30. I don't know.
I did not ask him about that particular answer. My guess is he was speaking more broadly. Look. At the end of the day, I'm not going to speak for the campaign, not going to speak to the president's campaigning schedule. That is something for the campaign to speak to. But they are partners in this administration, the president and the vice president. As you know, we announced SCOTUS reform at LBJ. LBJ.
All right, let me break it down again from a C student's perspective. We don't have a position. We're partners in this. And so I'm not going to speak to the campaign. Kamala has nothing that she can speak to as far as where she stands on any issue outside of abortion. The only thing that we know for sure, and two things is for certain, is that Kamala stands for the idea that it is a federal issue. Even though Trump said it's a state's issue, Kamala said that it is a federal thing that should be taking place as far as determining whether or not you should be able to get an abortion in the United States of America across the country. Trump said it's an individual states issue. That's the only thing that I have clarity on as far as where she stands. That's it. I don't hear anything. Even when it comes to Biden being the one that is the president of the United States of America today, he does not have a position at all. At all. Hey, listen, we stand together. We're going to campaign together. We don't have an official statement yet. We don't know what's going on. We just monitoring the situation. That's basically what they're saying. We're monitoring. We're going to pay attention to what happens over there. We're going to pay attention to it. We got our eyes on it. We got our eyes on it, guys.
Library just yesterday in Austin, and that was an important moment. That was an important moment to talk about where we are today. And the president met the moment talking about how no one is above the law here and how important the rule of law. I just started the top of the briefing talking about how it's so important to have the freedom of the press, right? And how we've had this is the 500th briefing. It is also important for our democracy. And so obviously the president and the vice president were partners in making that announcement in the sense of how they were going to move forward, of the three things that he laid out on what reform looks like for this administration. As it relates to the campaign, don't have anything specific to share, but this is certainly the Biden-Harris administration, and everything that we have done the past 3.5 years, we want to continue to do moving forward. And
so you want to keep letting our borders open and letting Venezuelans in. And that's what the translation is for me, because I have no clue on where you stand on this issue outside of the fact that they have not closed our borders. Zero clue. We got a bunch of fentanyl in here that's killing people. Shout out to Philadelphia out there looking like zombie land. But they didn't actually say anything at all. Zero, zilch, nada. They said nothing. We don't have a position on this. We don't stand on anything. We have no more clarification other than what Anton had already shown you. And so we're going to monitor this situation because the Harris-Biden administration is a team.